Hello everyone. Welcome to Cal IT2's theater. This is the third performance of Ideas, and we're having a whole series. So we're doing weekly performances throughout the quarter. And we're really happy to have Strange Journeys here tonight. This is Joshua Tonies, who you probably already know. And then also joining us is going to be Alexander Jarman for the panel, and Unjum Park also joining us for the panel. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Josh.
If you had an interest in actually navigating the image yourself, sort of, it's how it's intended, is not for me to direct it to you, but for you to actually...
I have a question.
Sure, of course. You hold down the trigger button, and then to move left and right, you just click the left button and drag it to the right. To move it to the left, you essentially do the same thing. To zoom in and out, you hold this right button down and pull in closer. When I was developing this, I was thinking about the way a static image could have a kinetic quality and have, I guess initially I had this idea that it had a correspondence with animation, and that if we were able to seamlessly move the image right now, I guess there would be this connection that I'm talking about. I think it might be just a matter of it loading. Partially, it started through a fellow in Pittsburgh when I was living in the Mid-Atlantic. There was one of my neighbors had a collection of money, and I thought, oh wow, I would like to do something with that. So I convinced him to let me scan it, and it actually was possible to scan the money seamlessly before computer vision was or machine vision was added to scanner drivers and image editing applications. So this was in like 2004, 2005. It was really easy for me to acquire the images or digitize them, and then I had them on a hard drive for about a good 7 years before putting them into this first context. I guess, actually, Matt, if you want to play, do you mind selecting the, you're doing it? Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Thanks. So yeah, this initial image was constructed with that that original set of images, and it was kind of a little bit of a dream to be able to work at a scale like this, to consider how an image could function in the context of this this scale and this sort of larger-than-life backlit like quality, which I will put into a context during the talk. But yeah, I guess I think about the way Chinese hand scroll painting and the way the panorama can be larger than, you know, in the image in totality you have to experience as a kind of series of memories or visual memories of a place. You take in sites or landmarks and then construct a, you reconcile the memory into an image. I think that's something that is really interesting for me and brought me into a mode of producing images like this. Yeah. So yeah, Hermione, I didn't answer your question. After arriving in San Diego, I think a few of my handbills came actually from my significant other who's here, and you got them from thrift stores, right? Okay. Well, you were also working. Yeah. And then some of them came from places like eBay, and places like Amazon. So, yeah, there's sort of this access to strange things that I would not encounter if I were stationary. I mean, there's the encounter in the thrift store, of course. But putting these things, stacking them next to each other, and kind of thinking about their ability, their directive as a form of exchange, I think is an interesting, like, visual problem and compositional problem. Yeah. For this image, it was, I guess it was like sculpturally composed, thinking in terms of space and sequencing in relationship to this series of collaborative performances that actually, I think it happened in the end of the winter quarter. But there was this functioned as a kind of graphic score, and the elements were nested and sequenced in dialogue with a series of performances, and that were like musical and improvisational, and they happened in this space actually, and this functioned as a sort of immersive installation during the first part of the performance, and then it translated into a backdrop, I think, in between one of the performances as well. So joining me on the panel is Alexander Jarman and Jung Park. You know what, I realized at the offset I forgot to thank Trish Stone and Shirok Yadagari and the people that organized Ideas, this performance series. I'm really happy to be here, and I just wanted to express my gratitude to everyone involved, everyone that came out, and especially the people working behind the scenes that helped set up the equipment and keep this facility running and functioning and thriving as a world-class research institute. So let's see here. Okay. So I'm going to start off by explaining the work in a sort of a larger context, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time describing the influences and curiosities that led to the construction of this. So the first thing I'm going to show you is a hand scroll from, it's titled, let's see here, sorry. It's actually a two-part scroll. The first part is called Return Clearing, and the second part is Departure Herald. But it's a 33-foot scroll. I guess in total, it's over 60 feet. Here's a preview of it. And it's from the Ming Dynasty, and it follows the travels of. I believe it's post. It's a post. I wish I had my notes right now because I am not a Wikipedia of knowledge. I'm sorry. But encapsulated on both of the scrolls, the artist depicted It's a depiction of. This departure and return to the capital after a battle. I think what I'm most interested in about it, rather than the specifics of its history, are its capacity to create this dynamicism, this type of motion implied in a static image, and activate a static space and capture in a great resolution and detail, as an image, thinking of the image as a technology. I feel like its capacity to explain motion, movement, and an event, I think it's more powerful than animation and the moving image. Let's see here, I'm going through my, there's a high resolution image of the scroll, and I feel like it has affinities in terms of the way there's almost this onion skinning of time that is where you see the same instance repeated. I don't know. I mean, maybe I could push over to my art historians to expand the conversation around scroll painting.
It's different for each dynasty, I mean, and each period, but this one is really unexpected of the many examples that are out there, because it falls along the lines of more official government documents, more similar to like the Persian Shahnameh or accounting of royalty, and so others have more of a philosophical bent, whereas this one is more of an official accounting of something.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the aesthetic of not being able to read things all at once and the treasury of memory instead of constant recounting. But when you see something like this, you can't see it all at once. It's impossible. So you see it piece by piece and meditate on it, and then you use your memory of what happened previous in dialogue with what you're currently looking at. So it's a totally different way of interacting with the image. It presupposes your own memory into your visual experience. Was that kind of what you're looking for?
That was beautiful.
All right.
Thank you. So yeah, I think the kinetic qualities of the image, the scale, and the way that it requires a active memorization of events and a description of space. Those were things that I think inspired the production of the image. I wanted to turn it to an American example. There's an American painter, Jonathan Banvard. He grew up in New York and began traveling the United States shortly after his father went bankrupt. And he was able to sustain himself by producing paintings. Initially, he was a portrait painter, and then he began traveling in this somewhat heroic way. This is an advertisement of this traveling painting where he constructed over 1,000. He cobbled together these accounts, these sort of plein air studies of the Mississippi River, and fashioned his own apparatus, his own image display technology to exhibit this in a kind of sideshow attraction, and traveled the United States exhibiting what was referred to as a 3-mile painting, but what was actually about a little less than half a mile. Still impressive, of course. He managed to take it to Europe and show it to dignitaries and royalty, and the painting itself actually was destroyed, and the traces of his work, there's little to nothing available. But when he was touring, he also did field studies of the Nile and other exotic locations, which I don't want to sort of pull up my notes and read in front of you because I feel like I glaze over and get really self-conscious, so I'm going to just keep going. Towards the end of his life, he invested his majority of his savings into this resort that was in Long Island called Glendia, after his niece, I believe, and it was a kind of failure. And the locals, it's now a beautiful sort of trendy resort, but during the time it was kind of referred to as Banvard's Folly, and for some reason that name stuck. And there's actually a pretty interesting book about his life and the lives of 9 other people. The title is Banvard's Folly, but it traces these people who almost changed the world, but then due to some misfortune. In the case of Banvard's work, he wasn't really added to the canon, was he?
No.
Are you familiar with? Have you ever heard of this person?
Besides our conversation, you are?
Okay. So.
No, well, actually, yeah. In the canon of panorama, which is a separate canon in art history in and
Sure.
of itself, and our National Gallery has a huge collection of them. He isn't mentioned in within that canon either.
Mhm. And it's interesting and worth pointing out that during his life he was one of the highest paid living artists. I also think it's interesting this image technology existed shortly before motion picture, and I believe it has an affinity, but I believe the idea of expressing motion in images dates pretty far back. I don't think it's suddenly during the advent of the moving image we have this idea of motion being imbued into a still image. But timing-wise, I guess there's something like vaguely heroic and novel about his approach that I really, I just kind of love and gush and get a little bit embarrassing about. But I think novelty, often has the risk of failure, and there's an element of experimentation, and people are kind of, I'm not going to say he was misunderstood by his time or anything. It sounds like he did pretty good. But no, I think there's the risk for failure and vulnerability with novelty is something that I think really is a point of connection and interest. So this is something I made before coming to San Diego, and it's basically a 50-foot scroll that I had printed to microfilm, and it was sort of, I think, the germ or this little glimmer of an idea that I haven't been able to shake off. So this was constructed, I guess it came out of a experience I had when I was on a train and trying to reconcile my memory of the landscape passing in front of me, and I guess in a very concrete and earnest way, I just thought of using the subject matter of vehicles, of things that move and describe movement in space, it was cobbled together, I guess, in a similar way as Banvard. They were just these like large collages that I sort of taped together or fashioned together in various ways, and then a relative of my family had microfilm processing, medical storage, and records business, and which was sort of going out of business because it's a fairly obsolete technology. And I contacted them because I thought printing it to microfilm would have this sort of physicality and interactive, like one-to-one relationship with an image that I guess has a correspondence with unraveling a scroll, or in the case of the gyroscope, there is a sort of an interface that allows for a revealing of space and involvement and duration. This is me a few years ago with a bad haircut in my studio testing out this. It was sort of crazy, this labor of like 2 to 3 months being reduced to, it was fed through this thing called a rotoline camera, which is it records fetal heart monitor, it's sort of the blip before the digital blip. You fed it into a 16 millimeter camera that took your scroll, your like long piece of paper, and fed it at the speed that the film plane was moving and recorded this thing. I was really afraid it was just going to rip up. It was like the only one I had, but it didn't. Drama averted. So yeah, I feel like this as a study, as like a kind of field note, as a landmark in the production of these things is is relevant to fold into this conversation. But it left me wanting to do more. So we looked at this image, and we got a chance to look at the new composition that's an expanded part of this. Something that got in the way of the production of this. When I started this in 2005, it was, you could scan anything, bring it into Photoshop, fake, government documents. You could say you were born somewhere else, or say you're a citizen of a place that you're not. And there's this technology, this machine vision or computer vision, which is a kind of way of looking for specific patterns that are embedded in documents that are sort of designable, that prevents you from duplicating or editing material that is rarefied in some way. So in the case of currency, which has this sort of paradoxical thing where it's a form of print, it has this correspondence with engravings, and you can mass produce them, but they have to be sort of protected in some way in their production. We have inkjet printers that can duplicate and give you can almost do microprinting. So then they invented polymer threads and holograms and all of these sort of, I guess Canada has some kind of plastic money that exists. So anyways, I got this error message when I started working on it after 2005 and was like, oh shit, like, okay. Banknote okay, well, what is that all about? So they have a counterfeit deterrence, and it's also built into scanners. So even before I got to Photoshop, I had to find a way to work around this. Part of it is you can modify the orientation of your handbills or skew them. You can actually go into the code of your scanner driver software and disable things.
You're teaching us to counterfeit.
But there was something really pregnant about this security measure. Like I was thinking, here is this thing that we're supposed to freely exchange, and then I can't actually enter into this and have a correspondence with this image. It's protected by these invisible technologies that I guess make it worth something, right? So the money is worth something because it has this technology in it, So this is I guess this slide demonstrates this this algorithm that is traceable across bills that were produced after 2006. It's essentially a pattern that is harder to detect by our eyes in terms of, but it has something to do with the orientation of discrete, repeatable types of visual information. It's referred to as the Urion constellation. 1996, I'm sorry, yes. But this is the thing that's built into computer software for handbill counterfeiting. So at this point, I just wanted to kind of cover, oh, yes. Well, that certainly is a workaround. You can fold or hide the total of it. I actually just modified the driver so that it would not disable the recognition rather than trying to find out exactly where the sort of hunting in the dark. But yes, you could also cut up the currency and reorganize it. What is that?
This is our new $100 bill, supposedly coming soon.
Oh yeah. It has a type of motion. These micro lenses. Do you know about this? Where this like blue strip. I believe that's where it is. If you move the image, there are like micro lenses that will make what, I don't know exactly, maybe it says 100 on it, this blue thing. It actually it moves. But it's not like a lenticular lens. It's sort of a different, some Swiss image printing technology that's patented and probably really expensive. So I wanted to introduce the panelists. I should have done it at the beginning, but here we are. And just to open up the conversation, since I have these geniuses here, might as well tap them. So to my left, we have Alexander Jarman, who is an artist and arts professional living in San Diego. The opportunity to make art is just as important to him as the responsibility to serve the art community well. Jarman is currently an adjunct professor at Point Loma Nazarene University and the manager of public programs at the San Diego Museum of Art. Through his work at the museum, he's able to provide opportunities to innovate emerging artists as well as bring established important minds to the region. He's worked as a curator outside of the museum, most recently at the Southwest College Art Gallery, which I happened to work closely with him on that show. I have to say I was...
And we're still friends.
Yes, there's that too. Since 2011, Jarman has proudly served as board member at San Diego Space for Art in the East Village neighborhood of San Diego. And to my extra left, on the end of the table, Jung Park is an art historian, independent curator, and educator. She recently curated an exhibition for the Museum of Tolerance in Los Angeles for the 20th anniversary of the '92 riots. She teaches 2 courses. You probably teach more than 2 courses right now, right?
Yeah,
How many courses are you teaching?
4.
She's teaching 4 courses. And she just defended her dissertation.
Yay.
And you got all your signatures.
Yay.
When did you do that?
It's official, so now I'm waiting for my little placket so I could print my own money.
Oh.
That's what happens, right?
She's also an adjunct professor at the Design Institute of San Diego, teaching modern art history and ideas in art and architecture since 2009. Her recent publications include A Productive Void for Teaching Diversity, an anthology edited by James Lee and Kerry Wastel? Mm-hmm. And Korean American Cultural Expressions, Evolution of, how do you say this?
Pungmul. Pungmul.
Pungmoy. For Koreans in America, History, Identity, and Community, an anthology edited by Grace Yo. Okay, so I have you here. You've had a chance to experience the work. Do you have questions or considerations?
Well, I'm really interested in talking more about, certainly we've talked about the sort of conflation of time in how you read these, but more so the conflation of space. And one of the reasons I was interested in looking up this new $100 bill, which is supposed to have come out, I think, last year. It's been 10 years in the works. It's finally going to come out this fall, I think, is, it does have all this new fancy, theft deterrence and holograms and things like that. And of course, the only thing anybody can talk about is, oh my gosh, it looks like Europe. Oh no, our money isn't green anymore. And so a lot of people are upset about that. And what's really interesting is to think about who uses that bill and to recognize that a full 2/3 of the $100 bills in this world are not circulating in the United States. They're all circulating overseas. And so, in fact, more non-Americans use these bills than Americans. And just thinking about that in terms of your piece and this incredible, I forget, how many nations are represented by currency in your work, but this incredible conflation of space that, yes, then represents sort of this global world that we live in now. But for me, I've always been interested in talking to you about that scale. And I know we even talked once about Alfred Korzybski and Jorge Luis Borges, and that idea of the one-to-one map, and the best map in the world would be the exact size of the world. And so how, basically my after all of that, my question is, when you're thinking about conflating the space, and at once you're thinking about you can't possibly ever see all of this. It is a panorama that envelops you. But at the same time, creating these landscapes that you want to find your way in. I mean, I forget who it was talking about the line drawing in the back, and out of all of it, I mean, because it is so massive, you can't take it in. And so you have to start parsing it out, and you have to start finding your way through it. And so I just wanted to open that up in terms of you being able to broadly talk about how you're creating these vignettes. How does that conflation of space then lend itself to a narrative? Because I think that's what we keep finding. When we start going in there, we start finding these little stories, we start finding our way through it, and it lends itself to narrative, even though you're creating this story that can't possibly be viewed in one breath. So that relationship, I guess, of the conflation of space to a story, to narrative for you.
You know, narrative, I never really... I think when I was working on the microfilm piece, I was very aware of narrative and the sequential logic of like cause and effect. And when working in a digital environment, I guess because of the sort of compositional space and scale, it seems like you're able to cultivate these like gardens of information that have affinities, that have like both very sort of strong formal relationships as well as there's kind of a when you flatten something or put it next to something else and create these juxtapositions or ruptures. I think that it's possible that there is a narrative component. I don't know if it's something that I'm like willing into the image more than a desire to kind of create a kinetic way of moving through an image. I completely understand and agree with your observation that it's maybe impossible to escape. But I don't think that I have a really specific personal narrative in mind for the image.
I always saw your pieces as always a negation of narrative, even though as human beings we always do have a tendency to connect the dots, as it were, and this propensity towards completing the narrative. But there's always a negation of the narrative there at really smart moments, I think. And not just this piece, but like to me, the arc of the pieces that you created since you came to San Diego. And I think I told you this before, you're always trying to, in a very sensorial way for the viewer, try to capture memory in the midst of loss, in its minutia, but also in broader geological times. And then even within all of the different scapes, the financial scape, the idea scape, the, what did I say, the ethnoscape,
as it relates
the
to
finance scape, you know, all the 5 scapes that Paterai mentions, you still kind of deviate from that space through a perceptual rupture. You deliberately, I'm accusing you of deliberately creating a perceptual rupture. And in that way, as much as money, especially currency, and also these in the ideoscapes of nationalities of, recognizing that chip from Australia, and, you know, and all of that, that is still in part negated by this perceptual rupture, which is why I think the entire viewing of this thing is so enjoyable. It's a sensorial joy because of that negation. And that negation to me is always bringing me back. And at the same time, I kind of want to see like the number version of it. I don't know, the accountant in me wants to see like if this was converted into currency and numbers.
Oh, right. What is the sum total of, what is the value?
But at the same time, because you chose obsolescent currency at some moments, and because nothing is ever cerebus paribus, or nothing is ever held equal as much as we'd like, you know, in economic analysis, you always hold things, all things equal, and then you do your calculations. But in reality, we don't live in a life that's all things held equal, and those numbers would still be flashing and fluctuating, whereas other numbers will be like the heartbeat, because they're worth nothing. So that's what I have to say about narration and your piece.
Wow. Well, thank you. That was very helpful for me. if people have any questions, yeah.
Comment about that. It seems like everything historically we're talking about in terms of scrolls and everything and currency and the way that currency is constructed and this view of the dollar bill, everything has a purpose for being there. Every line, every image, every single thing has a reason or a function for being there. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
so it's interesting to me that you would take away that function, first of all, and secondly, reconstruct something that had totally different rules, that has nothing to do with function. Um, Even in a secret code, like you're not giving me any indication that there's some secret information that you're maybe not sharing about the narrative, but rather that it's not there. You know what I mean? So it's just, there's a lot of levels of negation, and then it's not even a physical object. I mean, we're looking at this thing on the screen. There's nothing there, and yet it's this like really glorious screen.
Yeah, I mean I guess to me that is that to reflect on what both An and Amy and Alexander have pointed out about the sort of inherent density and this opacity, this sort of simultaneous grotesque level of detail, and its this, I don't know, difficulty, negation, or sort of intranslatable quality of it.
But that's the purpose of a panorama.
Yeah.
In the 16th century, a panorama was originally a book, and then in the 19th century, it became an educational device to help the human brain process things that they can't process all at once, and then it became the atlas.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, to sort of follow off of your reflections, there's, I guess there's this imperative for me. It's very precious for me to be able to make something like this that really can only exist in this space for like about an hour and a half or however long this event is, that took like months to work on. It's
Years.
not, well, yeah, I mean, it is years in the making. This is sort of an iteration of it. And this will be translated into another kind of interface for, that sounds so cold and weird, but it'll be projected at my thesis via some kind of interactive, non-video game-like apparatus, but in the way that I guess I was thinking about its affinity to Banvard, or to someone who has a chance to play a pipe organ in Germany once, and there's like a piece of music that they get to practice, and then it's embodied into this display and some human interaction with it, and then it kind of just exists as a memory or as a collection of experiences. To me, that's what's at stake, and that's kind of what compels me to do this. Yeah.
When you show it your faces or whatever, are they going to go left to right, or is it going to go up and down?
I have to. I'm working with a programmer on that. I don't want it to be like Minority Report level of control.
I was thinking in terms of flow. I mean,
Oh yeah, that it would, rather than just being a flat
Right.
representation of space.
yeah.
That's really. I might steal that idea.
Well, there's a screen
With your
there
permission.
on the upper floor that is like a globe on in this building.
Hmm.
I don't know if anyone has seen, you've seen it, where you could enter the space and the screen is a globe and you enter this circle basically.
Mhm.
And I forget which floor it's on, but it's one of the toys that's in this wonderful building.
Did you ever have?
Have you considered printing this image?
I've played with printing portions of it, but I feel like in order to do that, it has to. It's sort of what is the right gesture for, rather than simply. I mean, I guess I could print my own weird concoction of money.
Very wide print.
Actually making some fold out or some sort of. Yeah.
Which you had originally thought that would be the strategy for this, right?
Mhm.
But, yeah.
Absolutely. I guess, I mean, I would not be opposed to it, but I feel like I'd have to make it really difficult for myself in some way.
Heavy jet printers that print billboards.
Oh yeah, like a banner or something. Absolutely. Oh wow.
Does it have a finite beginning and end? Like, is this a discrete image that does not change, or is this an image that kind of continues to evolve?
In the way that we're seeing these two compositions that were created within months of each other, yeah, I feel like it will. And actually, I didn't answer your question correctly. I am planning on printing it, and it is going to be part of a permanent collection of at the Ratner Eye Center. I'm currently in like a sort of process of negotiating the best way for the piece to kind of have an integral presence and be durable on terms that I'm comfortable with. Yeah. But it hasn't been fully realized. Coming soon to an eye hospital near you. Then wait, there was something else. I'm sorry if I.
I was just curious about the sort of infinite incarnations and combinations that you can make with this material, and are these sort of finite fixed images, or do they change and evolve?
I guess that's like any artist that makes things or objects. My personal relationship to it, it is, I guess, I don't know if it's a life work that I'm going to still be moving these variables around, these specific discrete ones, but I do think that, yeah, we're seeing these sort of tableaus of activity in a given moment where it's resolved to a point that makes, gives a sense of completeness or fulfilling level of resolution where I can step away from it at that given time. So it isn't that it's, once it is fixed, it becomes like useless to me, but I feel like it slowly loses its, I think the moment that it's crystallized, it becomes a kind of strange thing to me. Yeah, and there's a need to kind of explain it on different terms. Yeah.
Josh,
Yeah.
is there any relationship between like the bills that you're using in any one image, so that I guess like the narrative and like what bills you're using in any of these pictures together? Like, is there any relationship between the currencies, like why you're using them, like currencies together?
I mean, sometimes if they're organized in kind of a taxonomy, I guess the way that I've been looking at the currency, as I was talking with they're like loaded with these signifiers of like what's representative of the nation that they come from, and in some ways, the handbill is a kind of initiation, or it's a requirement for a nation to exist. So I think that they're in some ways they have this deep series of they're laden with history and intention. So they're really heavy to work with.
Right, but you're not putting any particular currencies together for that specific reason.
I think so. I think that I am, but it's a really uncomfortable thing to work with, actually, because of that. Yeah. Similarly, when I was working with the archive at the research library in the San Diego Museum of Art, I was going through these autochromes, these turn-of-the-century photographs from a collection of it was Roland Schneider and Florence. Was Florence Kimler? Did she also contribute?
Absolutely.
So it was their shared collection, and I felt like those were like a personal archive, an index of their life and their interests, and it was very hard to step into working with those images because they had such a deep personal layer, and that spoke to who they were. That to make something reverberate within that archive was incredibly challenging. And I think in a similar way, it's kind of a minefield. working
You're
with the
cutting up national symbols. Of course, it's
Yeah.
a minefield.
yeah.
I mean, in a weird way, though, you know, it is the same thing as cutting up the magazine advertisement. In that this is the way these governments wanted to portray themselves, and these are handbills that have, going back to this idea of utility and what's their function, things like that. I mean, part of it is you know, marketing. I mean, I'm not saying it's total propaganda or
branding,
anything
yeah,
like that,
absolutely.
but you know, it's like this. You know, this is how we want to project our identity, and you know, you cutting that up, I think, actually has, you know, very distinct and explicit correlation to, you know, cutting up, like I said, you know, the regular magazine advert.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I mean, just to point out as a final note, in relationship to what you're saying, On brought up a really wonderful, when we were talking about the sort of nation signifier of the bill, the sort of pregnancy of information, there also this kind of ethnoscape, where in the way that it's there's all of these sort of invisible technologies that we can't see that are at play, that are kind of corresponding with each other and machines, and here we are surrounded by technology. In order to make this pipe organ work, we have to use all this electricity and circuitry and silicon. And I think the thing that is interesting about this sort of invisible traces, what makes it onto a handbill or currency is also a kind of negation of a set of values that exists in within the people that aren't being represented. So I think that by cutting it up, there's kind of a rupture, hopefully. I don't know. But I feel really uncomfortable. I'm still learning how to talk about what to look at or how to see something, because I don't want to. It sounds like really not insulting. I don't want to like be Matthew Barney and be like, it's about patterns. Yeah. So I hope this has been productive for those of you that have come. Thank you very much, and thank you to my panelists and to Trish and to the team that is manning all of the things that make this possible. Thanks, everyone.